Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 8 of Logicast, the AWS News Podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today by John, as always, Goodall, lover of swag, who I'm sure has got lots of swag within reach that he'd love to wave around in front of his camera before speaking to you, as he has been doing in our preamble. So how are you doing today, John, and what's your latest swag haul?
Oh, I'm okay. Next door's house has been sold, and the new owners are currently making lots of banging and drilling noises. So I'm enjoying that at the moment. And if any of the listeners hear some background hammer drill noises, I think they're changing the boiler and doing lots of heating flushing at the minute by the state of the water being poured out their door. So that's a bit grim.
Well, normally what we get is the background noise of your children. So I'm glad you've clarified that any hammering and drilling noises has got nothing to do with them. So.
No, I do have some swag. I do. I mean, I'm wearing one of my community builder shirts, and I'm very pleased with my new blanket. That's lovely and purple and very warm. So that's
Do you have that
helping with
over your
heating bill.
lap, just out of shot, like an old man?
No, not normally. No, sometimes I wear it like a shawl.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Anyway, we digress. Let's introduce our guest for this week. So we're very fortunate to be joined for the second time round, I believe, by fellow AWS user group leader, Ed Krask. How are you doing today, Ed?
Not too bad, thank you. Yep, good to be back on and doing another podcast. Yeah.
I see you're also sporting some AWS swag. Is there a story behind your hoodie?
It's got this on the side. I went along to a re-equip event in London a couple of years back. It was kind of a partner thing where we got some quite high quality swag. So yeah,
I
haven't got any of the other swag. Within reach, otherwise
that is obviously high quality swag though, and you've got the North Face. You got North Face logo on that swag though, so
it's nice
quality. Yeah, very good. So Ed, tell us a little bit about what you do for a living, what you do for the community, etc.
So I am a cloud architect for BGSS, and BGSS in the news at the moment because we've just been acquired by CGI. And it's such a new thing that I still don't really know what that means for me yet, for us as employees of BGSS. But it's exciting times. Becoming a large company, I'm sure there's plenty of opportunities to grow there. More clients, more sectors, more things, more bigger AWS partnership stuff. So looking forward to seeing what the future holds there. But in the meantime, it's kind of business as usual, still doing the same day job until things change there. But excited to see what's going to happen.
Excellent.
And as mentioned, I am an AWS user group leader. I help to run the Leeds user group. Got quite a team of us running that now. Because it would definitely be too much for me to do on my own. So really good to have such a strong team of people from various different companies in the Leeds area that help to put that together and make it a lot easier than having to rely on one company or dealing with having to pay for lots of things rather than getting local tech companies to chip in and make it a success. And it brings us all together as a community as well. So yeah,
nice. It's nice when these things start to take on a life of their own. We have a user group in Brighton as well that John and I co-founded, and Logicata has been the headline sponsor of it for the last couple of years. But we've now got another organizer who has volunteered from within the community that doesn't work for Logicata, which is great. And we're also starting to get calls for paper responses from people from within the community as well. So, it's nice to see it kind of starting to, you have to bootstrap these things a little bit, I think, to get them going. But nice when you see them kind of becoming more
organic
community-led. Exactly, organically growing. So, yeah. So what do you do for Leeds then, given that there's multiple organizers? What are you delegating the jobs? Are they being delegated to you? What do you actually get involved in?
Well, that's a good question. I guess not nominally I am the kind of leader, I suppose, depending on what name you wanna
Is that an extra row of medals on your chest? Is that
But I to be fair, I do end up delegating a lot of stuff. Certainly, we kind of take it in turns to kind of lead on a particular event, depending upon which venue we're going to have it at, whether it's at my workplace or someone else's or whatever, in order that we're not having to be constantly on the go preparing for the next one whilst this one hasn't happened yet or whatever. So it's always fun.
You guys are pretty regular, aren't you? You're monthly?
We try to do monthly. We usually don't end up doing them every month. We manage maybe 9 or 10 a year. Sometimes miss out Christmas and some holidays and that kind of thing. But yeah, it works pretty well usually to manage to do them about once a month. Yeah, it's not always easy. Certainly, I think the hardest thing is just getting speakers and not relying on AWS to send people all the time. But sometimes we get a good flow of people, and we've sort of started building up a bit of a list of speakers that mention that they might be able to do a talk, and then just keep prodding them every month to see when works, and then sort of relying on regulars in the community as backup if we need anything. But yeah, it works pretty well.
I think it would be fairly easy to get AWS speakers for every event, but it kind of misses the point of it being a community-led event, really. It's not supposed to be an AWS roadshow. It's supposed to be kind of community members sharing learnings and best practices and everything else. So yeah, it's good to it's good to mix it up and occasionally have someone from AWS because it pulls the crowds in, and but it's nice.
Matthias is a real crowd puller.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that was the last event we did, and it was really good getting Matthias up.
Yeah, he is a machine. I've liked
he is. I still don't know how he manages it.
Yeah,
particularly for that recap roadshow.
Yeah.
Whizzing around the country and barely taking time for breath, let alone actually having downtime between events.
Yeah, the same presentation every day for 7 or 8 weeks. It's anyway, yeah, 3 user group leaders on a call. But we're not here to talk about AWS user groups really, but it's all a very interesting discussion. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then John and I pick a selection of the articles from the newsletter that we'd like to talk about with our guests. So we have shared such a selection with Ed before the weekend to give him a fair chance to read them. Let's talk about the first of those articles this week, which is just one of the feature announcements. So a very short article, just a couple of paragraphs, really. But this is all about a new feature in Amazon SES, which now offers tiered pricing for Virtual Deliverability Manager. And I must confess, I'm not a big expert on SES, so I'd never heard this new TLA VDM Virtual Delivery Manager before. But John, I know you've played a little bit with SES. VDM, is that a new one on you? Or
no,
did you know
not the slightest, no.
Tell us all about SES and VDM then.
So it's Virtual Deliverability Manager.
Is that not what I said?
No, you said delivery, which you
okay,
don't want to virtually deliver the emails. You want to actually deliver the emails.
That's what I read, but obviously that's not what came out of my mouth. So yeah.
No, we spoke about this a little bit with Peter Sankauskas. Sorry, Peter, I'm going to forget how to pronounce your name on the 100th episode because he uses SES quite a bit, and I bashed it quite hard because I don't like it. And this it doesn't make me like it anymore. I still don't like it, but it does make one of the more useful features of SES, which is working out if stuff's actually been delivered. Because if you're doing transactional emails, it's less useful, I find, because they're just going to go through or they're not, and people are going to tell you whether they didn't get their transactional email. You're going to find out kind of from your users. But if you're doing 50,000 of them, then maybe you want to know about it. Or if you're doing promotional emails and what have you, you absolutely need to know things like your bounce rate and your complaints rate, which, if you're not familiar, complaints is when you go and mark something as junk or spam in your email client, that gets fed back to who actually sent it. And if it goes to a certain level, AWS will cut you off, which is a bit harsh, but kind of fair as well. You get a warning level and then you just get cut off. The problem, of course, with that is if you send a bunch of emails and then they don't do anything, and then 3 months later they all get marked as spam. It just goes big spike, and that's kind of a little bit unfair, but that's just the nature of the beast. VDM is part of the tooling that allows you to work out not just your bounce and complaints rates, but are things going through, click-through rates, and all that kind of stuff. And they've just made it cheaper, is what they've done, because historically you paid per 1,000 emails, and I don't know what the prices used to be. I think it was 7 cents per 1,000 emails flat. And they've just introduced tiered pricing for VDM, and that's okay. It's a bit of a meh, I don't care, because I wouldn't recommend anyone at the scale of our customer really use SES, because it's hard work. You have to do a lot to get out of the sandbox. You have to do a lot to get your send rates increased. You have to have history, and you have to raise lots of support requests. And I get it from AWS's perspective, because they've got this really high reputation from all of their services, and it's really reasonably easy. Actually, I say it's hard work because it's hard work through lots of hoops to jump. But once you've jumped through said hoops, it's a reasonably easy service to use. You can use it through old-fashioned SMTP or through the API, which I would recommend you use if you can, because SMTP doesn't do queuing. So you have to build your own queuing mechanism, which again is a bit dense, but it is what it is. And it can send, at the top end, millions of emails, tens of millions, once you get once you get your quotas increased. So they're really protective of it. So for small, medium businesses, use something else, really, because you don't need the top end, and to get there would take you a very long time. You're not BP, you're not Amazon, you're not Shell, you're not, I don't know why I'm doing oil and gas companies. I think they're in the news lately. But you're not one of these megacorps that's going to be sending 10 million emails a day. Go use SendGrid, go use Postmark, like whatever, use a third-party service that's easier to work with. But if you are using this price reduction is a nice touch, because it starts to take effect once you're sending over 10 million emails a month. And this is my point about SMBs. They're not sending that sort of volume of email. But if you are the post office, come up with another company, you might be sending that number, right? And you're going to start to care, because it's going from 7 cents per 1,000 for the first 10 million. And then for the next 90 million, it's 5 cents per 1,000. And over 100 million, it's then 2 cents a 1,000. So it starts to get cheaper. It's still really expensive when you're sending that volume of email, but third-party services are expensive for that volume of email too. So kind of pick your hard, really, pick your pain.
What are your thoughts on this, Ed? Are you a fan of SES yourself?
I guess fan is a strong word. I have
firmly ambivalent.
used it a bit in the past on the project I'm currently working on with my current client. It is being used, but I'm not one of the people that's actually working directly with it. It's just something that some of the services I work on have in the background to send emails. To be honest, it's not. It, like John said, is a bit of a pain to get set up. I know that we have some problems with it in terms of some of the organizations we're using it with. It just stops working. I mean, I only really got that much experience of using it sort of more for sending transactional type emails to internal users and stuff, rather than being used for members of the public. So slightly different use case, where we're not going to be getting to those volumes of emails that are relevant for the Virtual Deliverability Manager pricing. But yeah, it's an interesting one. SES definitely can be problematic, like you said, to get set up, and can be. Well, we're definitely having problems with some accounts not working, but I don't know whether that's SES or the services that are funneling the emails into SES, because it's not the thing I'm dealing with. But yeah, it serves a purpose, and clearly is all right for using for kind of very sort of AWS native things, where everything else is AWS anyway, and you don't want to have to set up some contract with some other third party to send email.
That's kind of the thing, isn't it? I've said this historically about the code suite tools more than anything, but if you have supplier contracts that you have to worry about, or preferred vendors, or you need to keep your data within the AWS ecosystem as far as possible, it's there. You can use it.
Cool. Well, there we go. SES, it's there. New marketing tagline for SES. SES, it's there. Yeah.
There we go. It'll do.
On that note, let's move along to something else that's also there. It's AWS CloudFormation. In fact, it's very there. Lots seem to happen with CloudFormation in the last year. So much so that on the AWS DevOps and Developer Productivity blog, they've done a roundup of AWS CloudFormation in 2024 year in review of all of the new features and enhancements that have been made to CloudFormation. So Ed, I'll come to you first on this one because I know that this is an area of particular interest for you. So there was loads of stuff in this article, faster deployments, improved error handling, streamlined troubleshooting, etc., etc. What caught your eye?
Well, to be honest, the main thing that I have with CloudFormation is I prefer to avoid using it because I'm much more of a Terraform person. And a lot of the things that are mentioned in this year in review are like, look, CloudFormation's finally decided to do something almost as well as Terraform after doing it really badly for years. So, so yeah, I think it's good to catch up. We all have to use CloudFormation a bit, whether we are using it for everything or not, and it's nice to see that they're continuing to improve upon it. Certainly, the significant speed ups with the adding the configuration complete event was going to make a big difference to a lot of people that are trying to spin up large CloudFormation stacks that can take absolutely ages to complete. So that's definitely a strong one.
Up to 40% faster, according to the article. So yeah, pretty significant.
It's probably still slower than Terraform for my use, but there we go. What else is there? The early validation stuff that seems quite sensible because there's nothing more annoying than deploying a CloudFormation stack and then thinking, oh well, I'll go and make a cup of tea because it's going to take a while, and then you come back and you see that it's rolled back because you've got something wrong in there somewhere. I think this is probably another one that Terraform is better at because it's more likely to tell you up front pretty early when you're testing your Terraform that you've got something wrong there before it goes through for ages, and then Terraform isn't going to roll everything back. It's just going to fail to create that one thing that you got wrong rather than trying to...
I mean, that's an option now with CloudFormation. You can tell it to not roll everything back, but that's really unhelpful on new stacks because you still have to go through, you still have to make your template changes, you have to push the updates, and it can get itself into a right mess. If you're doing a small update, and it's sort of gone, I couldn't deploy all of it, but I got this bit done. That's helpful, I find.
Yeah, that's fair.
The 40% speed up is quite cool, I find. CloudFormation is slow. It's slow. I don't know why it's so slow. It shouldn't be as slow as it is, but it is slow.
It's a bit quicker now, 40% in fact. Let me ask you guys this though. Given all these new features, and I know you're both Terraform fanboys rather than CloudFormation fanboys, but given all the new features that were announced in 2024, and there's been a couple of improvements already in 2025, is there anything that CloudFormation does better than Terraform?
That's a very interesting question. CloudFormation is never affected by rate limits. So there's that. And in part, that's because it's slow. And in part, that's because they work fundamentally differently. So Terraform is using API calls. I don't know which API it uses. I don't know what it's built. I think it's built Golang of all things, but it's using API calls, right? Which means that if you try and do too many things all at the same time, you can get hit by an API limit, by a rate limit. It's not common. It's a lot less common now than it used to be. It used to be really common, but it's not terribly common anymore. CloudFormation has never and will never be hit by a rate limit because certainly not within things like the APIs. You can still get hit by limits on other areas, but because of how it works, it interacts with the backbone much more directly. It doesn't get affected by external API rate limits. It's still affected by service rate limits. It means that you can't create more than 3 servers with C series CPUs unless you've got your quota's been increased. But that's like a service limit rather than a rate limit. So it's a lot better at that. State management is a bit of a hot button topic when you start comparing the two of them, because they do it fundamentally differently. I don't think CloudFormation does it better. I think it's just different. I do like the deployment graph that you get in the console. That's very nice, and that's a new feature from last year. That's very nice. You can see I've done it in this order. These things have taken this length of time. I've tried to parallelize things here. Its dependency kind of tree structure isn't quite as good, I find, as Terraform. Terraform is more efficient at finding I can do these things in these orders, and its implicit dependency mapping is better than CloudFormation, but it's improving. I'd love to see some sort of tooling come out of the Terraform ecosystem that gives me a graph of I've deployed these things. Not for any particularly valuable reason, because none of my deployments are big enough that would be helpful to see I can move these things around, because they're not actually hard dependencies. But it's a nice picture. Nice pictures are good.
It feels like the kind of thing that might already be there for Terraform Enterprise or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm very much an open source Terraform user rather than an enterprise user, so I don't know exactly what bells and whistles you get there. My thinking around what CloudFormation is good at, there's certainly certain services that don't have particularly sensible API support can work better in CloudFormation. There's some sort of life cycle hooks and stuff which CloudFormation can do fun stuff with, like when you're deploying EC2 instances and you want to ensure that certain things have been installed on there before it then continues to deploy some other bit of your stack. CloudFormation's got that functionality built into it quite well, and you've got to jump through quite a lot of interesting provisioning hoops with Terraform, which Terraform isn't really designed for as such to replicate that kind of behavior. But this kind of gets into the weeds of. Are you really sure that you want to architect your infrastructure like that, or is there a better way of doing it that maybe doesn't involve EC2 in this day and age? So yeah.
No, we run WordPress. We need EC2s. That's a good point. The wait hooks, or whatever it is they're called, that's just not really a thing in Terraform. And this, again, is because they're slightly different tools. You can get the same result, but equally you could get the same result with a bash script or Ansible or whatever. Terraform is desired state configuration. I want you to look like this, regardless of what you look like now. Go make that. CloudFormation isn't that. It's much more of a linear provisioning tool, it's great and it's good at what it does, but it's a different category of tool. And the comparison between Terraform, it's not apples to apples, because they achieve the same result, but they do it fundamentally differently.
Indeed.
And on that note, we are being slightly interrupted by some drilling in the background now, John, I think, unless that's
I think that might be in the
because
of my location, not quite.
Okay.
Yeah. I think someone has clearly heard that I'm recording a podcast and decided to make my life interesting.
To be clear, I don't live next door to Ed.
Well, on that note, let's move on from the. Let's move on from the CloudFormation versus Terraform debate onto security. This is an article on the Register, all about a free automated tool that hunts for exposed AWS secrets in public repos. Tool that's been open sourced recently, I believe. So, John, thoughts on this one?
It's a fun one. This I've not dug into the tool specifically. Lots of these things exist. This is a great LReg headline, as ever. Lots of these things exist already, be it public, private, whatever. GitHub themselves, as the article calls out, do this for public repos already and for enterprise repos. So if you're paying big enterprise money and you accidentally commit a secret, GitHub will tell you've done it and go rotate that toot, sweet. There's other tools out there, open source tools already, that will do this for you. You point them at specific repos rather than just go scan everything that's open. Trufflehog for one, which I've used before when we did our GitHub migration. I used that, and it's a nice tool. It works very well. It works very quickly, and you just have to run it yourself, which is good. This is slightly different because it's AWS Key Hunter, so it's just scanning the open internet for AWS keys that have been committed, which is it's an interesting sort of tool. It's the sort of tool that I'd expect a security researcher to put out there to say, "Oh, look, aren't I clever?" as opposed to having an actual use case per se, because I'm not going to sit here and run this to see that my keys have accidentally been exposed. It doesn't line up quite right. That's not what this is. This is a security researcher going, "Ooh," as opposed to it being anything really novel or really useful or anything like that. I mean, to be fair to the guy, he kind of says this already. It was created for educational purposes. They're not intended to be used for malicious activities. So, yes, miscreants can go and use this, but please don't, Mr. Miscreant. And it's not terribly useful for you to use kind of internally because it's just scanning the whole public internet anyway. Like, you should have better controls in place for that, I'd have thought.
Such as?
I mean,
Ed?
to be fair,
Well, for example, something that runs when you commit or push a change that checks whether you've got secrets in your change and says, "Oh, did you really want to do that?" And ideally avoids those secrets ever making it as far as the public internet would certainly be sensible. I've certainly worked on some projects that have that. I guess it sort of depends upon how private your repos are and what your security model is as to how important it is. But certainly, you know, there's not a lot of effort involved in putting a cheap open source tool in there in front. That I say cheap. Open source is cheap. It's free, but I guess I meant like cheap in terms of time and effort to put something in to just flag up any of those secrets. I did feel like this was a reasonably solved thing in terms of, you know, I've certainly seen news articles before where, you know, someone deliberately commits an AWS key to GitHub and sees how long it takes for something to happen. And it doesn't take very long, usually, for GitHub and or AWS to flag up that you've done it and potentially, you know, quarantine the IAM user or whatever behind those access keys to you know, prevent people from doing anything malicious with them. So interesting that this article suggests that actually there's a lot of secrets out there that are still potentially useful to malicious actors. I thought it was more of a solved thing than that in terms of you know, limiting the damage that can be done. But
yeah, I think Corey Quinn did that, like, intentionally, leaked some keys, put them in a public GitHub, and within, I think, 3 minutes, AWS has said, "You shouldn't have done that." And then within about 10 minutes, people were mining Bitcoin for him. So, like, okay. This to me, it's less about the tool and more about stop using long-lived credentials.
yeah, definitely.
You know, if you're using things like SSO and what have you, you do limit the blast radius of these sorts of things to the lifetime of that particular credential, right? So granted, you might have committed it and it's been used within 3 minutes. The horse is kind of bolted at that point. But again, it's stop using long-lived keys and stop committing things to source. Just stop doing it.
Indeed, yeah. AWS have certainly made it easy to never really have to copy paste access keys these days. Yeah, but I guess it's probably one of those things where, you know, someone's just testing something or developing something new, and they're just thinking, "Oh, I'll just try this out. Whack my keys in there. Oh, look, it does a thing. Upload it to GitHub, forgetting that I've kept my keys in there when I was testing it, and can be a problem." But yeah, it's
well, there we
something
go.
that feels like it should be a solved problem by now, really. But
yeah. Stop using long-lived credentials. That's my key takeaway from that one. On that note, let's move on to our next article for this week. This is an article on dev.to by AWS hero Danielle Heberling and former two-time podcast guest, I believe, as well, Danielle. This is an article that she's written about how to run AWS Fargate on a budget. So it seems to be based on an actual business problem that she has experienced, I guess, in her new role. I believe she's watered it down a little bit so as not to give any secrets away in the article. John, thoughts on Danielle's article? Be nice, because maybe she'll come back on the podcast again.
I see a podcast alum post. I talk about their article. That's them's the rules. I do make them. This is interesting. I mean, lots of what Daniel writes is interesting, but this is interesting. Yes, it's watered down for NDA reasons, and that's fair enough. When you're working in an NDA environment, but you still need to put content out because you need to maintain your hero or community builder status or whatever. That's always a fun little needle to try and thread there. So that's good effort. Fargate on a budget is an interesting one because Fargate to start with for this particular use case, which was just sort of short-lived tasks, I think was kind of the key takeaway there, was Fargate's cheap to start with. And if you're making it 70% cheaper than cheap, that's AWS are basically paying you to use it. No, not quite, because that would never happen. But it's if you're making it even cheaper than vanilla Fargate, that's good going. To be really honest, that's good going. Fargate Spot's reasonably new. We spoke about it when it came out on the podcast a handful of months ago. I forget specifically when, but it's reasonably new. It's a nice walkthrough. It's a nice way of talking about shutdowns because, as with regular Fargate for EC2, you get a 2-minute, I believe, grace period for we are going to take this kit back from you now. You must get off of it. And things have been built to handle that. And you can sort of say, if you look at using it for things like Kubernetes or whatever, you've got the pod autoscaler or the autoscaling scheduler or whatever it is that it's called. I haven't used it for years, but this is a solved problem. And again, this is a solved problem in this particular article. It's deregistration delay and that kind of thing. So you can say, okay, I've only got a couple of minutes, move things around, and it handles it. It handles it reasonably well. But yeah, this is a nice walkthrough. This is easy to follow, and if it's a solution that you kind of need to follow, which is I need stuff to run as cheaply as possible, but it's okay to be interrupted, and it happens to be in a container, give this a look.
Anything to add there, Ed?
Well, I guess I could certainly say that I have used Fargate reasonably extensively in its ECS guise rather than EKS guise. I do like it. It's nice as a serverless way of doing containers where I haven't got to worry too much about the hosts behind the scenes. Haven't actually looked in too much detail at Spot and looking at how to seriously reduce the costs there. This is certainly an interesting article to kind of focus on that, and it is interesting to sort of think more generally on AWS about what little tweaks you can do and what things you can make to save the pennies or indeed the cents as they will charge you in dollars.
Is it still a penny in dollars? Like, I'm sure that term's interchangeable.
Perhaps.
They do use the word penny in America, but I think only in relation to 1 cent. I don't think there's multiple pennies. I don't know. Maybe an American listener might wish to correct me on that, but
does tuppence translate into American?
Probably.
No.
I'm sure the kids of today don't know what tuppence is anyway. So
no, or halfpenny, in fact. But anyway, on that note, let's move along to our final article for this week, which before we start talking about it, we must point out that it has disappeared off the internet, apart from in the Internet Archive. So in between me sharing it in my weekly newsletter last week and us coming to talk about it, this particular article is no longer available on the AWS blog. It's not the first time I've seen that happen, actually. Share a link, it disappears. Google the article title, and it's just gone. So yeah, and I read the article, and I thought it was actually quite good. So I'm not sure why it's gone, but Ed did manage to find it on the Wayback Machine. So we've still got the article. We'll share the link to the archived version of the article because we are going to talk about it a little bit. This was an article that originally appeared on the AWS Cloud Operations blog and then subsequently disappeared. Now returns a 404 error. But it's all about best practices to respond to security risks across your AWS organizations. So, Ed, I'll come to you first on this, as you did manage to find it in the archive. So thoughts on this, both why it might have disappeared and anything interesting from the article?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I have had a flick through the article. Can't see anything that's obviously incorrect about it, or anything where AWS might be suggesting that you do something that actually doesn't make that much sense. So not very clear why it's been deleted. Certainly, we could speculate for hours, I'm sure. But yeah, like you say, the article outwardly seems pretty useful. That security is one of those things that you should definitely put the effort in to get right, especially on AWS. There's no shortage of guidance that AWS have for how to get security right, but certainly when you're dealing with larger scale deployments of AWS accounts using organizations or what have you, there's potentially quite a lot of effort to go to get security right. So it's useful having some prescriptive guidance like this to follow to help achieve that.
John, anything jumping out for you from this article?
I mean, I'm a bit more uppity about security than I used to be off the back of the recap that we went to in London, where I kind of discovered the security incidents response team and CERT, as it's called, and the security incident hub and all this kind of thing. So this is worth a look if you can get into it on the Wayback Machine. It's worth a look. Like I say, there's nothing that jumps out as to, oh, that's why they got rid of it. I don't know. Maybe the author got fired. That's kind of the only thing I can think of, that one of the authors shouldn't be on there anymore, and they couldn't just remove the credit for some reason. Like, okay. None of this is particularly new stuff. This is not groundbreaking. This is not earth-shattering stuff. It's things like automate as much as possible. You do have to respond to security incidents, and the way you do that is reasonably prescriptive. They've got a list in here: is detect and isolate, contain and mitigate. You can automate your remediation, investigate and analyze, notify, communicate, and then preventative measures. So this is all kind of fairly run-of-the-mill stuff, and it's like, here's how you do these things. It's worth knowing about the solutions library of guidance for business and technical use cases that they have in the automated security response on AWS (ASR), another TLA for your collection there. It's an add-on for Security Hub, and it's well worth looking into. And the security incident and the security response service, whatever it's called, I don't remember offhand, is worth looking into as well, if you can afford the price tag, because if you get the customer incident response team behind that, it starts at a princely $7,000 a month, which for SMBs is a bit spendy. But if you're spending $100,000 a month, another 7 isn't really going to touch the sides. It's a much smaller kind of number, but it's worth looking into if you have these really high kind of security requirements that you need to adhere to. It's worth looking into that as well. And like I say, yeah, it doesn't make sense that this disappeared. I don't get it.
It's not the first time it's happened. I have shared other articles and gone to discuss them in the podcast and found they're not there. So maybe we can have a chat with our friendly developer advocate to find out why blog posts get published and are subsequently pulled. But interesting one. Anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for Season 4, Episode 8 of Logicast. So we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, Ed, for joining us again. It's been great to hear your insights on this week's AWS news. Thank you, John, as always, for being my co-host and regular stand-in guest. If you are still listening to the podcast and you have enjoyed it, please like it, share it, tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you download your podcasts. And if you'd like to see what swag John is brandishing this week, we're also available to watch on our YouTube channel. So check it out, like and subscribe. That's all we have time for. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Logicast for you. Until then, thanks for listening and see you again next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.